A Florida man says he is lucky to be alive after contracting something that they call flesh-eating bacteria. In fact, if he had not sought treatment when he did, they say he would be planning his funeral right now. Michael Pulaska has this report.
A lot of people I've heard it happens pretty rapidly.
But Michael Grady tells us the most severe symptoms for his case of flesh-eating bacteria took weeks to develop.
When it got to be like the size of a lemon inside one of my butt cheeks, it was a sign that something wasn't right.
O'Grady and his wife Kelly were on vacation swimming in the Gulf of Mexico just off of St. George Island in the Panhandle. That was in late May. A few days before the trip, O'Grady says he got shots in his lower back for pain.
But it got in possibly, most likely, through this slight little tiny injection site where the steroids were put in. But the bacteria got in through those pinhole type injection sites.
O'Grady spent nearly 2 weeks at Citrus Memorial Hospital undergoing 6 straight days of surgeries to remove the flesh-eating bacteria. We can't show the pictures on TV, but I saw one and it was horrific. The pain must have been unreal.
It was so intense, I compared it to sitting bare butt on an active wasp nest.
About 4 days in, it was like, okay, this isn't getting better.
From there, things got worse.
They cut me from here to here, and they took my digestive system out and inspected it to make sure there's nothing necrotizing on it, and then put it all back in.
According to the CDC, necrotizing fasciitis is naturally found in Florida's waters, and the hotter it gets, the more the bacteria multiplies. What O'Grady told us scares him the most is that he doesn't have an autoimmune disease, so he thinks his body should have been able to fight off the bacteria.
It could happen to anybody. It's made me aware of my mortality, of that life is precious.
In Citrus County, Michael Pulaska, ABC Action News.
And here to talk more about this is Dr. Amish Adalja. He is an infectious disease expert, and he is with the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Welcome back, sir. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
All right. A lot of media hype about this flesh-eating bacteria and this necrotizing fasciitis. It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. But is the public in any real danger? How many people actually come down with this throughout the year?
Well, it's important to remember there's multiple different types of necrotizing fasciitis. The one you're seeing on TV, the one that you're hearing about associated with ocean water, that happens a couple hundred times a year. So about 200 cases are reported to the CDC. But you don't need to go in the water to get necrotizing fasciitis. You can get it from common bacteria. For example, the strep that lives on all of our skins can cause it. But what you see during summer months is an upsurge in reporting on these cases, which can be horrific and are very headline grabbing.
So what is this necrotizing fasciitis, and what are the various forms of it? How do you describe it as an infectious disease expert?
So necrotizing fasciitis is a big word, a fancy word, that really means a skin infection that involves the skin and the structures beneath the skin. And because of the way our bodies are structured, an infection in this area can move very, very rapidly and progress from maybe involving one part of your leg to the rest of your leg very, very quickly. It can spread systemically, cause people to go into sepsis and septic shock, will require multiple rounds of surgery plus antibiotics, and it can have a very high mortality rate if not caught quick enough. And it can be caused by a variety of different types of bacteria. The one that we're hearing about in the Florida Gulf Coast area is something called Vibrio vulnificus, but not all are caused by that. Some are caused by, like I said, strep. The same strep that can cause strep throat can cause these types of infections. Staph, MRSA, all of them can cause it in different types of scenarios.
How important is it for anyone who is a victim of it to recognize the symptoms and get it treated early?
It's an emergency. It's really a surgical emergency. So when you have these types of infection, the most important thing is to get to a hospital and get to the operating room to get it kind of debrided or cut away. And the surgeon has to cut kind of ahead of it. It's almost like a forest fire. They have to get ahead of it and burn back so that they don't spread it. It can be
That's the reason a guy had 6 days of straight surgery.
Right, and that's usually the norm when we have these cases of necrotizing fasciitis, that people are continually going back to the operating room to keep this infection at bay, because it is very aggressive and requires a lot of surgical treatment.
You know, the guy that was featured in that piece, maybe it was lucky he did get it in his buttocks because I've read cases where it advances so fast that they have to cut off limbs.
Yes, it's not uncommon to see major amputations. You can have a whole leg have to come off. I've even seen a case myself of somebody getting it in their face and on their eyelids, and that person eventually died, but it was a horrific type of infection.
Well, that's what's so scary about this. But again, I want to go back and try to calm the public in any way that we can. The incidence of actually contracting this are fairly low compared to some infectious diseases, aren't they?
Right. This isn't like a normal skin infection. This isn't common. Not every nick and cut or little skin blemish you have is going to turn into this, but often sometimes these media reports will fuel a lot of panic. But it's important to remember that these are very uncommon infections, and when they happen, they tend to be pretty fulminant, and that's why they grab headlines. But most skin cuts, abrasions, and little skin infections will not turn into necrotizing fasciitis. But it's important to keep an eye on all of them, and especially if you have those types of infection, if you're going into salt water or brackish water, it's important to cover those wounds and to clean them afterwards.
Why salt water or brackish water? I understand on the coast where fresh water from rivers may be emptying in to seawater is a place where high infections could happen.
Well, what I'm talking about, salt and brackish water, we're speaking specifically about a specific type of bacteria that can cause necrotizing fasciitis, Vibrio vulnificus, and it thrives in brackish water. So that's why we're seeing these cases clustered in those areas. This is something that's very common in the water in that area. It increases over summer months as the water gets warmer. And that's why we warn people when they're going into that type of water. If they've got cuts, if they've got, for example, liver disease is a major risk factor for that type of infection with Vibrio, we warn them not to do that. And then if you do get an infection after going into that type of water, it's important that you tell your healthcare provider that, yes, I was in salt water, so that they have this higher on their index of suspicion.
All right, Dr. Amish Adalja is our guest. We are talking to him about infectious diseases, including the so-called flesh-eating bacteria. We'll continue our conversation with him in a moment, and if you'd like to join us, just call 412-333-PCNC. We'll be back in a moment.
If your credit card debt is out of control, if you're in over your head in monthly payments, there's a secret the credit card companies don't want you to know. If you have more than $10,000 in credit card debt, you have the right to let us settle that debt for a fraction of what you owe. That's bad news for the credit card companies, but it's great news for you. We're Credit Associates, and we're offering you free information on how to virtually eliminate your credit card debt with a monthly payment you can afford. To see how much you could save, call now. 1-800-524-9742. Don't declare bankruptcy. Don't consolidate. Give us 10 minutes and we could save you thousands. After all, we depend on your success and offer a guarantee so there's no risk. Credit Associates. Live better, debt-free. Find out how easy it is by calling now. For the secret the credit card companies don't want you to know, call Credit Associates now and see how much money you could save for free. Call 1-800-524-9742.
If you love everything about where you live except super slow internet, we've got good news. Introducing Viasat Fast for All Home Internet. With unlimited data, you can download or stream your favorite shows, movies, and sports on all your devices. Now everyone in your home or business can tap into super fast internet. Call Viasat today at 1-888-665-3296. Upgrade now to much faster internet. In fact, Viasat is 3 times faster than typical DSL. Get Viasat now and we'll guarantee your price for 2 full years. Everyone watching this commercial can now get super fast internet. Call now and get the perfect plan for you and your family. Plus, you get free standard installation that's fast and easy. Go to getviasat.com or call 1-888-665-3296 to sign up today or visit your local Viasat retailer. Viasat, Fast for All, is here.
Infectious disease expert Dr. Amish Adalja is our guest. Dr. Adalja, what about global warming? They talk about the temperature of the sea rising and these bacteria thrive in warmer waters.
So it's definitely true that when you have bacteria that like a certain temperature, the bigger that range of the temperature you have on the globe, the more likely you are to see it. And we have seen some of these infections move up to, for example, the Delaware Bay, where they hadn't been. And that's related to the temperature rising there. It's hard to make one-to-one type of causation, you know, that the global temperature rose and this happened, but we are seeing the spread of this bacteria going into waters which were traditionally not places that were at risk, and that may have to do with the temperature rising in the Delaware Bay, for example.
I've read articles about the Delaware Bay and how farmers upstream from there have used a lot of fertilizer, and they have these huge pig farms, and all of that washes down into the Delaware Bay, and it affects people who are crabbing down there and doing all sorts of seafood, ingesting seafood, particularly uncooked seafood.
Yeah, so we know in general that infectious diseases tend to crop up when you're having eating raw or uncooked seafood. So oysters are one place where you can actually get this skin infection, not just from being exposed to it in the water through a cup, but you can actually eat a raw oyster and have this bacteria within it, and then it can actually cause the infection, cause a necrotizing skin infection. And it's not because necessarily that it's because of fecal contamination of the water. It's just that that bacteria can live in crabs, it can live in oysters as well. But other diseases, for example, hepatitis A, for example, can be found in oysters from fecal contamination. So it's very important when you're swimming in any kind of water, whether it's in the Gulf or whether it's in Lake Erie or in the Allegheny River, that you look at the fecal contaminant levels. They measure that type of thing. They call it coliforms. And when the water reaches a certain threshold, you shouldn't swim in it. When it reaches another threshold, you shouldn't boat in it. And obviously, you shouldn't be drinking it. But that is something that we think about as sewage runoff into waterways that people are using for recreation.
Are you familiar with this case that came out of Kennywood where a guy got splashed in one of the water rides and supposedly was infected?
I've seen there was a water ride case. I don't think it was at Kennywood, but where someone got splashed and got actually a brain-eating amoeba from it. But it's not. These things are very, very rare, and it's hard.
Brain-eating amoeba?
Yeah, so that's another thing.
You sound like Vincent Price, no pun intended.
So that's another thing that you see headlines, and there's a headline today in North Carolina about somebody getting a brain-eating amoeba. This happens about a dozen times a year in the United States, often in warm water, for example, pond water, where someone jumps in and water goes up their nose, and it ends up being a very devastating infection. But it is very, very rare, and it often will grab headlines and will scare a lot of people. But if you think about how many times people jump into ponds and lakes and how many people get this brain-eating amoeba, the risk is very minimal, but when it does happen, it is something that scares a lot of people.
As an infectious disease expert, tell me how this compares with the Ebola crisis that's happening in Africa.
There's no comparison. The Ebola crisis in West Africa is one of the biggest public health threats that we face currently. The WHO just two weeks ago declared a public health emergency of international concern, something they've only done 5 times. We have over 2,600 cases there, 1,700 deaths. This outbreak is occurring in a part of the DRC, which is a war zone where people cannot go, where there are ISIS-allied fighters killing people, where doctors have been killed, people who get vaccinated have been killed. This is probably the most challenging Ebola outbreak that we face. We've already seen spread into Uganda. It's a very dangerous situation and very precarious because of the security situation there, and not enough people in the United States are paying attention to it.
Is there concern also about superstitions, about vaccinations, or even real concerns about vaccinations and how they've been used in the past?
There is a concern there that the public isn't accepting of the vaccine. There have been a record number of people vaccinated, but yet this outbreak is still going on, which means we're not vaccinating all the people that need to be vaccinated. And there have been people that have opposed vaccination there, that have tried to attack and destroy vaccinators' equipment. There's actually a man who got vaccinated and they killed him because they thought he was going to bring Ebola. So there is a lot of superstition in that part of the DRC that is a part of a very virulent anti-Western, anti-vaccine, everything, basically. It's a kind of a tyrannical, anarchical area that has made it the most challenging Ebola outbreak in history.
All right, back to the flesh-eating bacteria here in America. You talk about brackish water. What about hot tubs, swimming pools, the traditional places where we go when the weather's hot, like it has been recently, to cool off? Is there any chance of contracting this kind of disease there?
There are different types of bacteria that live in different types of water. So when you're thinking about hot tubs, there are, for example, bacteria like Pseudomonas, which is one that lives in hot tubs, and you can get skin infections from it. So it's important that whatever water that you're in, is it adequately sterilized, is it adequately chlorinated? All of these types of bacteria can thrive when things aren't at a highly sanitized level. So it's really important to think about that, especially if you have cuts or abrasions and you go into those waters, or if you get something after the fact, you start to get a red spot or swelling or pain, that you tell someone that you were in water so that they can actually look at it. But yes, any kind of recreational water can pose a risk, but again, it's small and not everybody, it is safe to go into the water.
You know, America loves its pets. When we take them with us, do pets contract these kind of diseases when they splash about with us?
Yeah, pets can contract these diseases. Often they don't get noticed as well, but yes, pets can get skin infections as well.
And how important is it if you have some sort of lesion or open cut that does not heal, a wound that does not heal, to get treatment immediately and recognize the signs?
So if you see your cut getting red, hot, the redness is spreading, you start to have fevers, a lot of pain, it's really important that you get seen sooner rather than later, because it could be a sign of a deeper infection, and it may require surgery, it may require antibiotics, but it deserves being looked at by a physician.
Are companies that produce vaccines looking at producing one that might prevent this, or are the numbers of people who have contracted it so low it's not economically feasible for them to develop such a thing?
So it's kind of both. So when you talk about the one that's involving water, Vibrio vulnificus, there's probably only about 200 or so cases, so there isn't really that much of a push for a vaccine. But strep, the same strep that causes strep throat, the same strep that causes many different types of skin infections, there have been people trying to make a vaccine against group A strep for a long, long time. It's very challenging and very hard to do, but that is something that may be on the horizon in maybe a decade or so if all the research pans out, and that may knock off one of the causes of necrotizing fasciitis, but there are still, like I said, many different types of bacteria which are capable of causing this.
Well, if we haven't had enough summer fun or warnings about some of the overdoing of summer fun, I think this one is significant, and recognizing those signs early is important. Dr. Adalja, thank you very much. We appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm Chris Moore. Our program will continue in just a moment. I hope you'll stay tuned.